from Pier 3 in San Francisco. Welcome to Bloomberg West, where we cover the global technology and media companies that are reshaping our world. I'm Emily Chang. Our focus is on innovation, technology, and the future of business. Let's get straight to the rundown. Facebook lists new risk factors in a revised regulatory filing just over a week before the social network is widely expected to start trading on the public markets. So what are these newly revealed risks? We have all the details. Dan Loeb's demands get louder as the activist investor pushes Yahoo's board to immediately appoint an interim CEO to replace Scott Thompson and install Loeb's choice of directors. And you are now looking at never-before-seen video of Steve Jobs. It's from the personal collection of a former Apple employee, and he is here with more images of the Apple co-founder that are just now being seen by the public. But first, to the lead. We start with breaking news about Facebook. The social network has filed a revised S-1 with the SEC, revealing new concerning information about the second quarter. Facebook says the number of ads on the site is not increasing as rapidly as the number of daily active users. The document also lists a new risk factor regarding the monetization of mobile. For more on this, let's bring in our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, who's been combing through all the latest details. Corey, what are you seeing in there?
I'm combing right now. Look, kind of interesting because when these deals get close to happening, the changes are very important because they're the very changes that affect the company. Maybe that they've said something during the roadshow and they have to get them in the S1, otherwise they could be open to lawsuits afterwards. So I want to show you what the new risk factor that's been added in. It's really interesting. Based upon our experience in the second quarter of 2012 to date, that's the quarter in right now, the trend we saw in the first quarter of DAUs, its daily active users, increasing more rapidly than the increase in the number of ads delivered has continued. All right, let's break down what they're saying there. What they're saying is they're adding users, but the advertising rates are not going up as much. So they make it sound great, but actually businesses are fundamentally about making money. And so let's look at the money. I pulled these numbers from my model, but this shows you the average daily active user and how many dollars each user has brought them. And what you see is that number was kind of creeping up and maybe down a little bit on a year-over-year basis. That's going into the quarter that they just reported. It's a lot easier to see if we look at percentages. So take a look at the percentages of the change that we've seen on the average daily active user and how many revenues they've brought in and how that's changed sequentially. Well, look how that number was going up and then barely went up at all and then was zero, no change at all. Now they're saying the trend has continued. Well, the trend was to go from 30 to 3 to 0, and they're saying the trend has continued. What they're telling us is that the quarter that they're going to report after they go public is going to show that ad dollars or ads served per daily active user has actually gone even further down into negative territory. That's a big change for this company and a disturbing one right before the Facebook IPO.
Right, Corey, that could be pretty significant. We're going to be digging more into Facebook coming up later in the show. But first, we also have some breaking news on Cisco. The company reported earnings after the bell today, and the stock is getting killed in after hours, down more than 8%. Corey, let's bring you back in on this one. What exactly is going on here?
Well, the bottom line is what they came out and said the quarter was, in line with estimates and expectations. As you know, I think that's crazy because all it's saying is that if it's not what the analysts expected, the company was wrong. No, the analysts were wrong. So let's look at what's going on at the company. What's happening is they're seeing slower growth. Let's look at just the revenue number. Forget how much money they spend or how many machinations they make with free cash flow and buying back shares and all that junk. Just look at revenues. Here's a chart showing, I think we've got a chart of the revenues over the last 6 quarters. So if you look at, and including the midpoint of the revenues they're predicting for next quarter. So you can see that number has gone from 10.8, it's called 10.9 billion to 11. The 11.53 billion again is the midpoint of the expectation for next quarter, which they just announced in the conference call. It's not even a press release. I know that's hard to see because there's no scale there, but for a giant company like Cisco, you're looking at their headquarters down there in San Jose. Let's look at the percentage change on a year-over-year basis of revenues. And that really tells you the story of what's going on at Cisco, because they're trying to turn things around, right? And hey, when they went from 3 to 5 to 11% year-over-year growth, that looked like a turnaround. Fell to 7%, that ain't so good. Now they're saying, if you're going to believe their revenue guidance, that it's only going to be 3% increase. That trend is not their friend, and that's what they're predicting for next quarter.
All right, trouble for John Chambers, CEO, trying to turn that company around. Corey, thank you. Turning now to Yahoo, activist investor Dan Loeb wants CEO Scott Thompson replaced immediately. It's been almost a week since Loeb revealed Thompson's bio listed a computer science degree he didn't really have, but Thompson still has his job. Yahoo has said the board member in charge of hiring him, Patty Hart, is out and started a committee to review the situation, but that's not enough, says Loeb. Not nearly enough. Now Loeb, a hedge fund manager with Third Point Capital, is demanding Yahoo CFO Tim Morse take Thompson's place as interim CEO. Loeb wants himself and 3 of his nominees appointed to the board, one of whom he would like to chair a search committee for a new permanent CEO. For more on the boardroom battle that's led up to the Loeb latest, let's bring in our senior West Coast correspondent, John Ehrlichman. As usual with Dan Loeb, John, not a short list of demands here.
No, that's true. And to fully understand this story, you have to look at how many changes we have seen in the Yahoo boardroom over the last few months. I want to take you back to February 7th. That's when we saw a major announcement from this company. It said that several of its long-term board members, including the chairman, Roy Bostock, were not going to stand for re-election. Remember, this was not long after Jerry Yang, one of the co-founders, said he wouldn't be staying on, and they introduced 2 new board members, Maynard Webb and Fred Amoroso. A week later, Dan Loeb comes out with his game plan for who should be some of the additional new board members to go along with those 2 that we just mentioned. Here's what he comes up with. Himself, as well as some of the names you've heard over the last few months, including Jeff Zucker, formerly of NBC Universal. Then we didn't hear so much on this issue until late March. Of course, there was back and forth squabbling from the 2 sides, but what we saw was Yahoo announce 3 people that it had decided would be joining the board, and details on its view on Dan Loeb. They didn't want him on the board. They said they could find common ground with one of the board member proposals that he had, which is Harry Wilson, but that was it. And it is really since that point, Emily, that you've seen this get nastier and nastier, and then, of course, Dan Loeb unveiling that reality about Scott Thompson's resume.
Indeed, John, and we are on day 6 of this saga, so what happens next? What happens now?
Well, obviously, we know the board is reviewing everything that went into the hiring of Scott Thompson. Until we know what they determine on that, we really don't know where things are going. We do know that Dan Loeb said today that he immediately wants his 4 board nominees put onto the board, including himself, and he wants the CEO search to begin. But whether or not there's going to be a CEO search depends on whether Yahoo feels that they need to change that position, and obviously that depends on whether they've got a legal leg to stand on.
Okay, thanks for that, John Ehrlichman. We're now going to talk about some of the legal issues that might be involved in this situation. Can Yahoo just fire Scott Thompson because Dan Loeb wants them to? Well, joining us from New York to help answer that very question is John Singer, a co-founder and partner at the law firm Singer & Deutsch. He specializes in employment issues. John, welcome to Bloomberg West. So, give us some context here. What are the legal issues that Yahoo is dealing with right now? Can Yahoo just fire Scott Thompson?
Well, keep in mind that a person of Mr. Thompson's seniority and his position means that he's not an at-will employee. He clearly has an employment contract which has a for-cause provision contained therein. And the question is, does lying on a resume, which of course results in a violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley statute, does that constitute a for-cause termination? And my guess is it probably does.
Okay, so how about Dan Loeb? What legal grounds does he have to be making the demands that he is making?
Well, you have to understand there's a demarcation here between shareholders, the board of directors, and the officers of the company. Shareholders can elect the board, and the board, of course, can hire and fire the officers of the company, such as Mr. Thompson. So because Mr. Loeb wants Mr. Thompson gone is not entirely relevant. It's what the board wants, and the board right now is wrestling with the determination as to whether or not Mr. Thompson has violated the causal provision in his employment agreement.
Okay, then what about the board? Is the board protected? I mean, Dan Loeb wants them to go as well.
Well, that's where Mr. Loeb and his 5.8% stake in Yahoo comes into play, because, of course, the shareholders, and he is the largest shareholder, they determine which board members are going to be on the board and which are not. So he's going to have some control of the board, and there's going to be elections this year, and I have a feeling that there's going to be an entirely new board, or the majority of the board is going to go by the end of the year.
Well, exactly. Nobody has taken responsibility for this yet. Thompson has apologized for the distraction that employees are facing, but nobody has taken responsibility for the error in itself. How do you expect this to play out, given the murkiness of how this all happened in the first place?
I don't know how he can keep his job, given the fact that, again, keep in mind that Sarbanes-Oxley passed in 2002, which required CEOs and CFOs of the company to certify that the financial statements were accurate. On April 27th, Yahoo made a filing with the SEC containing biographical information for Mr. Thompson, which erroneously stated that he had degrees in computer science and in accounting from Stonehill College. That's a violation of Sarbanes-Oxley. I don't know how he can continue to preside over this company given this material misstatement in the financial statements.
What responsibility does Yahoo have in this situation? Whether or not they were responsible, this was in Yahoo's SEC filings.
It was, and Yahoo clearly had a responsibility to make sure that the statements were accurate, to ensure that the veracity of those statements was 100%, and they didn't do that. It's not, in this era of transparency, it's not that difficult to determine where someone went to school, what degrees he or she had, and in fact, if you looked at the eBay filings, and Mr. Thompson was with PayPal, the eBay division, this computer science degree did not make its way into their SEC filings, but it all of a sudden did in Yahoo's. And Yahoo, had they just looked at the prior filings noting his degrees, Mr. Thompson's, then they would have seen that there was a discrepancy, and therefore they bear responsibility.
And it was out there on some of Thompson's bios dating back to 2004. John, how long do you think this process is going to take? I mean, Dan Loeb is asking for action now. Is this going to take longer than shareholders want it to, essentially?
Oh, I'm sure it will, but what they're wrestling with now is a difficult question. Mr. Thompson presumably has a very, very lucrative employment agreement and probably a very lucrative severance package. And they're wrestling right now to determine whether or not what he did does in fact invoke the causal provision of his employment agreement. Most for-cause provisions in these employment agreements talk about engaging in felonies or gross misconduct. They don't address lying on a resume, but clearly that's what happened here, and I'm sure that that's what they're wrestling with now to determine whether any payments have to be made to him on the way out.
Such an intriguing turn of events at Yahoo. John Singer, partner at Singer & Deutsch, thanks so much for giving us that insight there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, we have exclusive, never-before-seen video of Steve Jobs just released by a former Apple employee. We talk to the former staffer and bring you the images coming up. And for all the latest headlines, be sure to check out our online tech channel at Bloomberg.com/technology. Welcome back. I'm Emily Chang. AT&T's big bid to buy T-Mobile USA failed last year after antitrust regulators made the dramatic decision to oppose the deal. Now, sources tell Bloomberg T-Mobile is taking back another whack at a merger, looking at Metro PCS. The deal may involve a stock swap, giving T-Mobile's parent company, Deutsche Telekom, control of the combined entity. Other options may include an IPO or an outright sale of T-Mobile USA. Metro PCS shares jumped as much as 29% before closing up about 14% in today's trade. For more on this news, let's head back to our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, who is standing by in the newsroom. Corey?
Yeah, Emily, a $5 billion merger is big news on its own, but the importance of a big telecom merger on the suppliers to that telecom, well, that could affect dozens of big tech companies, not least networking giant Alcatel-Lucent. We're lucky to have the Alcatel-Lucent President of the Americas, Robert Vrij, help us make sense of this. Robert, is one fewer telco in the U.S. a good thing for Alcatel-Lucent?
Well, Corey, it's definitely a reflection of what's going on in the industry today. If you look at the way that the service providers are trying to address the explosive growth that they're seeing in data traffic, what's happening on the consumer side with the need for more content coming in video-rich types of applications, and you start looking at spectrum, for instance, as one of the things that are limiting the ability to provide those kinds of services that are bandwidth enhancing and taking up a lot of space in the network. You're starting to see operators looking for alternatives, and this is certainly one move. However, we believe that technology companies such as ourselves need to continue to focus on just addressing that challenge and making sure that our technology certainly help relieve that bandwidth pressure that they're seeing as a result of that data explosion.
Yeah, I mean, we all love our iPhones and what the network companies got to do in the back end, and the purchasing activity of the telcos. So important there. So let me ask you about that, because we see some of the telcos, AT&T and Verizon. Last year's spending habits were a little bit weird in that the first half is usually a little bit lighter than the second half. Last year the first half was bigger. There was no sort of second half flush, if you will. What are you seeing? Let's just say specifically with Verizon and with AT&T. What are you seeing in spending habits by those two carriers this quarter?
Well, what you're really seeing overall, more in a macro picture, that the CapEx situation somewhat year over year is on or about flat. What you do see is certainly the trade-offs of wireline for those converged operators such as AT&T and Verizon looking to move some of the spending from the wireline side to help address what I spoke earlier, the big explosion on the LTE front, which is a big race that's on, as you know, to help address the data explosion situation.
Right. The 4G, if you will.
Exactly.
Right? That's sort of the LTE. There are all flavors of 4G. So talk about that. So the old technology, CDMA, falling off, LTE ramping up. What's that ramp look like right now? Maybe how is that different than it was, let's say, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah, I tell you, the race is on. It's clearly that a lot of the differentiation is coming from the service provider to their end consumers by having this LTE capability, this flexible platform that really delivers, at the end of the day, the ability to support these data, video-rich applications. So clearly, the race is on. We're really seeing an amazing amount of growth, and 3-digit growth, in fact, in LTE. And certainly the service providers are taking the trade-off within the wireless assets to do a little bit less in the near term on 3G technologies, but 4G is just exploding, including for us at Alcatel-Lucent.
It's interesting because, so many of these companies we cover, whether it's the Facebook news we were talking about earlier, saying that they're seeing faster growth in mobile, or their Instagram purchase, which is all about mobile, or so many other companies we talk about, all talk about this mobile growth at the expense of something. It sounds like what you're saying is really at the expense of wireline and maybe even some basic routing capacity.
Well, certainly, on one side, you're starting to see the offloading of some of this data traffic on the wireline network. So some of the predictions earlier on, certainly in terms of wireline spending declining at faster rates than actually what we're seeing. So that's good news. On the other side, we're starting to see some new opportunities emerging around LTE, for instance, voice over LTE. And so we as a company are looking at technologies such as IMS to leverage new applications such as presence, multimedia, and what I referenced certainly in voice over LTE. So on one side, you've got some legacy areas of spend, but then also some new areas of spend that are related to LTE and mobile emerging, and we're taking advantage of those.
Really interesting. I really appreciate it. I think there's no greater disconnect in the markets right now in technology between what's going on at your company and the way the market looks at your company. So it's fascinating to hear what you've got to say. Robert Vrye, Alcatel-Lucent, President of the Americas. Emily?
Thank you, Corey. Coming up, ESPN has one of the highest subscriber fees for any channel, but could competition from a new sports network put pressure on them to lower the price tag? We go inside ESPN for the answer next. This is Bloomberg West. I'm Emily Chang. The cable networks, primarily ESPN, helped drive Disney's 21% increase in profit last quarter. ESPN is considered one of the crown jewels of the Disney empire. Bloomberg's Carol Massar got to take a closer look inside ESPN.
Disney's very own juggernaut.
I'm not sure I'm going to accept the characterization of a juggernaut.
John Skipper may not like that term, but he is also not sweating the competition.
I don't think if you go to our competitors, you'll find anything that looks quite like this anywhere.
But maybe soon. Connecticut is about to become ground zero in the fight for sports dominance as NBC gets ready to move into ESPN's territory.
There are folks just looking at you guys, kind of salivating. Does that keep you up at night at all?
You know, I tell people, if I lay down in the daytime, I go to sleep, so I don't stay awake at night, no.
And why lose sleep when you have a steady cash flow?
Talk to me about subscriber fees if you can. I mean, that's a huge part.
We're in favor of subscriber fees generally.
And why wouldn't they be? It's the biggest part of their formula for success.
Mama said there'd be days like this.
With the highest subscriber fees in the business, ESPN charges north of $5 per subscriber a month. Add in affiliate revenue, where ESPN also leads the cable networks, charging the highest affiliate fees, which means they profit 4 times that of its rival, Time Warner. Those fees also allow ESPN to stay ahead of the competition and buy expensive media rights, such as the $1.9 billion 7-year contract with the NFL for Monday Night Football, or the 12-year agreement ending NBC's reign for rights to air the world-famous Wimbledon tennis tournament.
You say the name Disney, and you think about Mickey Mouse, you think about, great movies, TV shows, the theme parks, but really they make their money from ESPN. I mean, they should almost change the name of the company to ESPN.
Does ESPN give Disney the ability to make mistakes?
We don't think of it in that way, and I've never ever gotten from the Disney guys any sense of that.
But high revenue does give ESPN the ability, in the spirit of Disney's motto, to innovate.
And 3D hasn't driven viewership yet.
Right.
I mean, the adoption by fans has been low to date.
I mean, the actual product at home isn't quite there yet.
Well, you got those glasses.
While the obstacles are minimal for ESPN, John says the future is an upgraded philosophy of the past.
So I think as long as we're on best available screen, as long as we adopt new technologies, continue to get the rights, we got our relationship with distributors, I think ESPN 10 years from now has every shot of occupying the kind of place we occupy right now.
Nice job, Carol Master. One big event that won't be on ESPN is the Olympics. They lost the bid for Olympic coverage to NBC Sports. John Skipper says he'll continue to bid for the games, and they would do it in true ESPN fashion by running everything live. And later this week, Bloomberg will be going inside Disney with an exclusive interview with Disney CEO Bob Iger. That is all day Friday on Bloomberg Television. Facebook's eagerly awaited IPO could be just over a week away, but some potential investors say founder Mark Zuckerberg hasn't been making a good impression during the company's roadshow. We'll find out why. Welcome back to Bloomberg West. I'm Emily Chang with your top headlines. Verizon Wireless could be facing government opposition to its plan to buy airwaves from cable providers. Sources tell Bloomberg the FCC and the Justice Department are looking at whether the deal could harm competition in the wireless industry. Netflix will now offer movies and TV shows from 20th Century Fox in Latin America. The multi-year deal will let Netflix users stream shows like Glee, 24, and The X-Files starting July 15th. Shares of Netflix closed up 2% today. And an anti-pornography group is leading a boycott of Groupon. Morality and Media says Groupon offered discounted tours of San Francisco's old Armory building, a historic site that now serves as the studio for the porn company Kink. Groupon says the tours were focused on the historic building and were not pornography-based. News Corp reported earnings today after the bell. The media company, which has been mired in hacking scandals, reporting better than expected results with net income up 47%. For more on News Corp and today's other tech movers, let's check in with our senior West Coast correspondent, John Ehrlichman. And John, more controversy over Rupert Murdoch's ability to lead.
And as a result, it's nice when you've got some cash that you can offer shareholders to keep them from getting too concerned. That's what's happened to the stock after hours, a positive reaction to News Corp's results that were better than expected. But the bigger story that the company is going to buy back double its initial stock buyback plans. Last year talked about $5 billion. Now they're going up to $10 billion. And absolutely right. In fact, Chase Carey, the #2 at News Corporation, basically defending his boss, Rupert Murdoch, on the phone hacking scandal issue, but for now, investors bidding this stock up. Another one that was moving after hours, Priceline. This has been one of the hottest stocks on the planet over the last couple of years, but there are some concerns now about what's happening in Europe and whether that's going to slow down their bookings. The company came out with better than expected results for the first quarter, but for the quarter that they're in right now, those estimates falling short, and that has taken some money out of the stock after hours. And the final one I just want to show you, similar profit outlook story. This one, as you can see, Activision, up a little bit. They came out with better than expected results. This is the company behind the Call of Duty franchise. The outlook falling short, but some analysts think they're generally conservative on guidance. In fact, they've only missed in one quarter over the last 2 years, so perhaps Activision playing it safe. Emily?
Okay, thanks for that, John Ehrlichman. Electric car maker Tesla also reported earnings today after the bell. Big earnings day. Our Corey Johnson is back with a closer look at Tesla. Corey, explain Tesla to us. You only have a minute.
1 minute, I promise. Okay, so Tesla comes out with earnings after the close. The earnings missed estimates. They always say estimates are meaningless. It just means the analysts were wrong. Here's what was really important. Tesla has to ship their first Model S car. That's not the Model S car. That's, as you can see, the Tesla factory. But here's how many orders they've taken for their cars. This is for the Model S. So in the quarter, they took 2,000 orders. That's a little bit better than Q4, and every quarter has been a little bit better than the last quarter. The orders, the reservations are not very important because the reservations are fully refundable. But that car, that black car on the right, not the cool Roadster on the left, that's the key to Tesla's future. They say they're going to ship it. Not only are they going to make their July deadline, they say, they're going to beat it and ship the car in June. That was good news for the company. Stock surging in after hours. I think I made it.
You did make it. That's a record. 50 seconds. We're going to make you do that every day,
no.
Corey. Yes, thank you. Now, potential Facebook investors are watching Mark Zuckerberg very closely to see how he will fare at the helm of a major public company. During Facebook's roadshow this week, Zuckerberg has stirred up a bit of criticism about his style and his attendance. Earlier today on Bloomberg Television, Larry Haverty of GAMCO Investors voiced his concerns around Zuckerberg's absence during a roadshow meeting. Take a listen.
At the end of the day, you miss the leader. There's no leader there, and I was a naval officer. It's the captain who drives the ship, and Mark's the captain, and it would have been nice to have been able to spend some time and see how he interacts with people asking intelligent questions, which were in excess supply in Boston.
For more on Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook's impending IPO, let's bring in Shervin Pishafar of Menlo Ventures. Always great to have you here.
Great to be here.
So do you think it's a big deal he didn't show up for a meeting in Boston? How big a deal is that?
Not a big deal at all.
But he's got 57% of the voting power in the company, and he is Facebook.
Look, this is silly. People are criticizing him for wearing a hoodie. Now, you're speaking to someone that had the logos of companies shaved on my head last time I was here. So, and I'm wearing a T-shirt. Silicon Valley culture is not formal, and we just want to create, and we want to disrupt the world. And Mark Zuckerberg has been disrupting the world and doing good in really meaningful ways. And let's not forget, again, Sheryl Sandberg is an incredible leader, and he's in good hands with her presenting the company with their CFO. And he's manning the ship of the company, the product, the team, and inspiring the team to ever greater levels of greatness.
Now, you referred to my interview with Michael Pachter of Wedbush Securities from earlier this week, talking about the hoodie. Let's take a listen to that quote, which has stirred up a lot of controversy.
Right. Mark and his signature hoodie, I mean, he's actually showing investors he doesn't care that much. He's going to be him, and he's going to do what he's always done. And I think that's a mark of immaturity.
Either way, he's breaking the traditional mold of a public company CEO.
Come on. I mean, this is like saying Steve Jobs wearing a turtleneck and jeans and sneakers was a sign of immaturity. Steve Jobs was the greatest CEO ever to live in history. Mark Zuckerberg has the potential to be as great. So I think this is a non-issue.
So do you think Wall Street has no reason to be skeptical? There have been some. Andrew Mason of Groupon has also stirred up a lot of controversy for being sort of quote-unquote immature. Does Wall Street need to be cautious?
Well, I mean, Andrew Mason is not Mark Zuckerberg. He's a great entrepreneur, but these are two different types of entrepreneurs. And Mark Zuckerberg has built an incredible engine for growth and is disrupting many things in the world. And the thing is, look, as Gandhi said, they first ridicule you, they laugh at you, they ignore you, but at the end of the day, you win. And Mark Zuckerberg is winning.
So let's talk about how he has disrupted this industry. How does Facebook going public impact your job and the startup ecosystem here in Silicon Valley?
Well, as we've talked about before, this is one of the most historical times in terms of startup history. Companies are becoming multi-billion-dollar companies in a contracted amount of time at less cost. And so Facebook going public is an incredible moment in time. It's a milestone, but it doesn't change anything. These companies are growing regardless of Facebook being there or not. These types of trends like Uber growing or Fab growing, or one of the most interesting things is a new company called SocialCam that is connecting the iPhone in terms of social video like Instagram did for photos, but they're connected to Facebook, and now they've become the biggest Facebook app at the same time as becoming the #1 app on the App Store. So for the first time, and this kind of growth to 36 million users happened in 2 weeks. So that's indicative of the potential for companies to grow at ever faster rates.
For so long, though, so many startups have succeeded by being based solely on Facebook. Are you still as interested in companies based solely on Facebook, or is now the fact that Facebook is maturing and becoming a public company mean that there are other things to be looking at here?
Well, this bridge between mobile and Facebook is really interesting. This thing the growth that happened with SocialCam also happened with Branch Out, which is another company that's doing a LinkedIn inside of Facebook. But their growth is coming from mobile on the Facebook app itself. So this is a really interesting that this just happened. Like literally in the last maybe 3 months, in the last 90 days, this connection between Facebook and mobile growth has happened, and that's where the future lies. And that's really great evidence of the value that they're going to create.
Quickly, I believe last time you said it's going to be worth double $100 billion. Do you stick to that?
I stand by my prediction that Facebook will be a $200 billion company at some point in the next 5 years, for sure.
Okay.
This is a company that's going to continue to disrupt the market.
We will quote you on that. Shervin Pishavar of Menlo Ventures,
Great,
thanks again for stopping by. Coming up, the battle for mobile payments is heating up, with Verifone getting into the race just this week. The company has a huge point-of-sale credit card network, but can it beat Square and PayPal? That story is next. Welcome back. I'm Emily Chang. eBay's PayPal service is expanding in Japan. PayPal is forming a joint venture with SoftBank, Japan's third-largest mobile phone company. The two companies will each invest about $12 million in the venture, which will be called PayPal Japan. The service will allow businesses to accept debit card, credit card, and PayPal payments through smartphones. Another company betting big on mobile payments is Verifone, the company well known for its devices used to swipe credit cards at cash registers. Well, now it's going after those merchants who might not have a cash register. Our senior West Coast correspondent John Ehrlichman has that story. John, sounds like Square's bread and butter.
Well, look, I mean, there are a ton of companies that are battling for this market right now. Square and PayPal, a couple good examples. They're all betting that more and more people are going to use their phone to pay for a hot dog. Verifone's come out with something called Sale, and Jennifer Miles is Verifone's Executive Vice President of North America. And Jennifer, I know Square and Jack Dorsey, they get a lot of attention, but they do have some really good traction in going after those individuals who are self-employed and who have never used this stuff before. You guys already have a pretty good relationship with small businesses, but you're basically taking this sort of to the next level.
Absolutely. Listen, small business is nothing new for Verifone. We have a 60 to 65% market share in small business today. What Sale lets us do is extend that relationship to do 4 key things. 1, it lets us help them open their enterprise up to take a variety of different payment types. 2, we can help them get to know their customer base better and navigate through that customer base to help drive more business. 3rd, we can help them manage their back office more efficiently as they grow and ultimately help them grow their sales.
So there's a lot of in part of the value proposition you guys are offering. What about just getting out there and getting the message out there? I mean, people have to go and knock on doors to those very small, self-employed people who maybe have never used a payment system before to get the word out. And how many people do you have out there doing that?
Well, that's actually one of our strengths. Verifone has been in this business for 30 years. Again, we have a very well-known brand within the small merchant space. We have a legacy of multiple channel partners, whether they're banks, whether they're ISOs, and part of the benefit of this solution that makes us very different from some of the current players is we have an open platform that's really allowing our existing channel partners and new development communities to build on to what we are doing.
Let's stay on that for a second. So give me an example. I mean, if you're the hot dog guy or something, how does an open platform potentially help?
Well, so again, this is a solution that's for everybody from the hot dog guy to the handyman who may do 1 or 2 transactions a month, to the florist or the storefront around the corner that may have an online web presence, they may want to sell sidewalk sales, or something in between. So the developer community, take the comparison of the grocery store, who is a small business, but it is specific types of products, and the florist. From a back end, the way they manage their business, it's a little more sophisticated than the hot dog guy. So they need to integrate with back office tools that help them manage everything from inventory to products, to know when and how to reorder things that are important to them. So by opening this up to a developer community, we can give very specific verticalized solutions to these small businesses as they continue to grow, while still meeting the micro merchant or the small business that just needs basic payments.
Kind of does a little R&D for you guys at the same time.
It's a lot of fun.
When are you going to know if you've done as well as you wanted to? I mean, you guys are a pretty big company, and we're talking about small numbers to start with. So is it going to be 2 years from now you're going to look back and say, we have this many million, independent business off? Like, how are you going to know?
Well, and again, this isn't a new venture for us. We know small business. We also have already $10 billion in transaction volume going through our platforms today. This is an extension of our already existing mission, driving more value for the small business consumer and ultimately helping them move up market into this mobile world that is continuing to evolve.
Before we go, there are so many people out there that are going to be targeted that, in theory, you don't have to be going after whoever PayPal or Square is going after. But are your sales teams going on, knocking on the door and making that pitch on why you should switch from Square?
Well, I think there are 2 ways to look at this. Again, there is an existing legacy infrastructure of feet on the street and people that are out there talking to new merchants as well as trying to convert existing merchants over. Our current channels and our new sales strategy is going to drive both of those collectively together. Verifone's been doing this for years. We know how to approach this market.
All right, Jennifer, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for your time.
Jennifer Miles of Verifone. Emily, back over to you.
Thanks, John. And the video you've been waiting for, a former Apple employee has just released new video of Steve Jobs. We have got that exclusive footage here on Bloomberg West. Welcome back to Bloomberg West. I'm Emily Chang. Finally, the video you have been waiting for, exclusive, never-before-seen video of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs has just surfaced. The video is from the personal collection of a former Apple employee, Craig Elliott. Craig Elliott is here with us now. Great to have you on the show. You stirred up a lot of excitement. You were the guy that released that FDR video last week. Where is this video from?
Well, it's actually from a box in my attic I've had for, over 25 years. But originally it was some internal sales videos that were done at Apple.
And this is the video that you released last week where Steve Jobs is playing FDR. Essentially, the whole premise is going to war with IBM. And this new video that you're releasing today to us also has to do with IBM. It's called Blue Busters?
Yes.
As in Big Blue Busters?
Well, a takeoff on Ghostbusters because it's 1985, right? So that's when Ghostbusters was very popular.
So this video was released in 1985, and it was an Apple promotional sales video. We're looking at it right now. This was showed to fire up the sales team, apparently.
Exactly.
Tell us what's going on here.
Well, you have to remember in 1985, IBM was the big, concern for Apple and others. It was the year that they introduced the PC Junior and OS2 and a lot of things. So when the dealer salespeople were, getting concerned and they were being courted by IBM, Apple came out with this as, this is our way to fight against the big blue
And
busters.
the criticism at the time was that Apple Mac computers didn't have software, right?
Right, that was part of it, yeah.
And you see Steve Jobs in this video with an Apple II strapped on to his back, essentially.
It's his Ghostbusters outfit, his Blue Busters outfit.
So he was really game for these kind of things.
Yeah, and I think, that's the important part from my standpoint. There's been a lot of, I'd say almost criticism of Steve Jobs recently about what a harsh taskmaster he was, and he had a fun side too. He liked to participate in things like this. So I thought it'd be nice, 25 years later. I originally put some of these videos out just to show my Apple friends, and they were taken down and reposted and went viral very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the internet now. I really love the story about how you ended up working at Apple. You were basically the best sales guy, third-party sales guy for Apple in the country, and you won a sales contest and you won dinner with Steve Jobs.
That's great. Dinner with Steve Jobs.
He gave you a Porsche.
And a Porsche. I was 23. So, and then probably better yet, about 3 months after that, they called back and offered me a job in California. So I've been out here ever since.
So 30 years later, I mean, looking back on all of this, how does it strike you?
Well, I mean, what a pivotal point in my life. I had no intention of even being in the computer business. And then to go out and have dinner with Steve, get the Porsche job at Apple, worked for Apple for 10 years, had a great career there, and then went on to do 2 startups after that. So.
And you worked at Apple for a really long time. You helped Steve, I guess, celebrate his 30th birthday.
Well, that was actually, there was a number of other people who put that video together in the creative services group, so they get all the credit for that, which is a great video that they put together.
But we also have, this is it, the video of Steve Jobs on his 30th birthday. I mean, isn't it amazing that people still care about this, 30 years later? He's passed away, and yet you put a video like this on the internet, and it just, people go crazy.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I didn't have any expectations of this other than my Apple friends, getting a chance to see it.
What did Steve mean to you? I know you've gone on to start a couple of other companies.
Right. Well, I mean, it's been a dramatic turning point in my life, having an opportunity to work, a bit with Steve, but then with Apple, and learn so much and become part of Silicon Valley. It's definitely a big turning point in my life.
Do you think he missed his calling as an actor?
He certainly seemed to enjoy it and did a good job, I thought.
He certainly seems like he liked to have fun. Craig Elliott, former Apple employee, sharing with us exclusive, never-before-seen video of Steve Jobs. We'll see how this one spreads across the internet. But thanks so much for sharing that with us. I appreciate it. Now, we do have some breaking news to tell you about, news out of the Google versus Oracle trial, which has been going on for the last several weeks. The judge has now ruled on whether Google's use of Java to create Android was, in fact, fair use. That is the question the jury could not come to a decision on. We will have more on that coming up next. And more on that breaking news now. The judge ruling on that very important fair use question in the Google versus Oracle trial. What exactly did he have to say?
The whole deal was they used these copyrights they didn't have a right to use, Google did, to build Android, but did they not have a right to use them? The jury said they used them. We still can't decide if they had a right to. The judge just came out and said, no, the jury did not agree with you, Oracle. You can't go on and maintain that you were not allowing Google to use this.
So
for the copyright portion.
The judge is saying that Google fair use does apply in this situation, that Google used it fairly? The
judge is saying the jury didn't make a decision, so you can't act as if they did. Now let's move on to the patent portion of the trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does this mean?
Well, I think it's, good or bad are words we don't always use, but I think probably good news for Google, less so for Oracle, because the takeaway yesterday was Oracle was going to go down this road based on what happened with the jury, and we would see what happened, and now this is the end result.
And this definitively means then that Oracle can't seek the $1 billion in damages that it was originally hoping for.
No.
Only $150,000?
No. So I went back to Oracle on this and got an answer after we were off the air yesterday. And what they said was they can still go after big damages in the patent portion of the trial, but they can't get $1 billion for copyright infringement. Remember, it's about copyrights and patents. They lost the most important thing in copyright.
So it all comes down to the patent phase of the trial, which is still continuing and which we will continue to cover. Thanks so much, guys, and thanks for joining us for this edition of Bloomberg West. We are back tomorrow.